Hi, I'm Spiral.
And I'm Rich.
And welcome to Hoop Technique, a new system for learning hoop dance that provides a framework for creative expression. The hoop is an invitation to dance, a portal to individual gesture and flow.
Hoop Technique will give you conceptual tools to solidly understand and demonstrate different theories of hoop movement. Ultimately, you'll use these fundamental concepts to weave your own unique movement tapestry.
Hooping, or hoop dance, is a hybrid movement art using handmade hoops and combining elements of urban freestyle dance, circus arts, Native American hoop dance, object manipulation, and dervish-like spinning. Hoops re-emerged in the late 90s when legendary jam band The String Cheese Incident threw them into the crowd, reinvigorating a movement. A new culture of large, handmade hoops facilitated an unprecedented ease of movement and dance, much different than their whammo predecessors. As these new hoops grew in popularity, they spread into other subcultures, namely the West Coast rave scene, where more dance found its way into the hoop and the hoop movement began to grow. Today, hooping's growing popularity is evidenced by several national conferences, as well as the hoop's ubiquitous presence at most festivals, including Burning Man, which has become a primary gathering place for hoopers from around the world. The inclusive nature of the hoop movement is demonstrated by vibrant online and local communities. Initially practiced almost exclusively by women, the number of male hoopers continues to grow, broadening the conception of hooping and bringing a masculine perspective to the evolving vocabulary of hoop movement. Performance showcases featuring international artists have helped cultivate hoop dance as an art form. Over the last decade, contemporary hoop dance has grown to become recognized as a comprehensive wellness tool, fitness modality, performance art, spiritual practice, an outlet for artistic expression.
Hoop technique theory encompasses a broad range of hoop movement and vocabulary. It evolves from combining our individual perspectives and years of experience.
Our theory includes the idea that hoop dance can be an expression of how we experience the world. We can all make our dance more authentic by allowing our unique backgrounds to inform our movement. By learning from the influences of others, we expand our potential. By sharing, we generate endless inspiration.
We've oriented hoop technique theory around 4 key concepts: space, energy, time, and flow. These 4 concepts provide a framework for creative expression and expansion.
The concept of space explores the relationship of body and hoop to the space we occupy while hooping. Within space, we'll further explore the ideas of isolation, scale, and 3-dimensional shapes.
Energy refers to the intentional physical and emotional tones with which we can affect and articulate the quality of our movement.
Time theory links the visual and sensory aspects of hooping to rhythm. When connecting with time, we make the audio visual.
Flow is improvisational creative expression, a state of relaxed focus that allows for effortless transition from movement to movement without thought. Flow is the result of dedicated, repetitive practice through which fundamental understanding, expertise, and muscle memory can be achieved. The reward for this dedication is a transcendent state where movement and music are in complete harmony. In addition to the four main concepts of hoop technique, exists an important idea to consider in relation to them all: contrast. Contrast involves the juxtaposition of different characteristics in order to create a more dynamic expression. It's beneficial to maintain an awareness of the spectrum of possibility within each concept and consciously apply the idea of contrast.
For each of the four concepts in hoop technique, we'll share both theory and related moves. Our intent is that each concept can be applied to any move.
These concepts are intended to provide a framework around which your movement repertoire can expand and deepen. Each concept can be thought of as a lens through which all movement can be examined and experienced.
In hoop technique, we've chosen to use literal, descriptive terms to speak about hooping based on the concepts and mechanics of movement.
We carefully chose these terms to be as precise and clear as possible in order to provide an open framework of terminology that would enlighten the process of teaching, learning, choreography, and general discussion about hooping.
There are two directions in which the hoop can rotate. Most hoopers find that they have an easier time hooping in one direction than the other, especially when hooping on the body. We'll refer to the direction you find easiest as your primary direction, and the opposite as your secondary direction. Directions are also commonly referred to as currents. On-body hooping is hooping on the core, from your ankles to the top of your head. Most on-body hooping takes place on the torso, from the hips to the chest. Once you take the hoop off the core, it's off-body hooping. Generally in off-body hooping, you're manipulating the hoop with your hands. The center of rotation is the point about which the hoop is rotating. This is the center line of your torso when hooping on the core. When spinning the hoop on your hand is the center of rotation. The point of contact is the point at which you're contacting the hoop. Your mastery and control of the point of contact correlate directly to the precision of your movement and the manipulation of the hoop. Counterpoint refers to the point on the hoop directly opposite the point of contact. An understanding of the orientation and momentum of the counterpoint will add proficiency and dynamism to your movement. In an off-body weave, the hoop passes from one side of your body to the other, or from the front of your body to the back. In this example of an off-body weave, the thumb is leading, hands and fingers are relaxed, and the momentum of the hoop does most of the work. When we are hooping off-body and manipulating the hoop with our hand, it's often useful to determine the hoop's movement in relation to your thumb or your pinky. In thumb lead, the hoop moves in the direction your thumb is pointing. In pinky lead, the hoop is moving in the direction of your pinky. Inside grip is when you grip the hoop from the inside, palm facing away from the center of the hoop. Outside grip refers to gripping the hoop from the outside, palm facing toward the center of the hoop. This is similar to gripping a steering wheel.
Stalling refers to turning in the same direction that the hoop is rotating, whether hooping on or off body. When you spin in the same direction as the hoop, the speed of the hoop slows in relation to your body. When your turning matches the rotation of the hoop, it stops its rotation and stalls out on your body. Stalling is a helpful technique to utilize in the learning and execution of moves. as it facilitates both ease and grace.
We'll begin with a brief warm-up intended to lubricate your joints and gently stretch your muscles. We also suggest spending a song or two flowing with your hoop before proceeding to get connected with your hoop and raise your heart rate. During the course of this DVD, we'll be covering a wide range of movement. Please listen to your body and stop immediately if you experience any pain.
Begin with your feet together. We'll start with 4 arm circles in each direction to open up the chest and lubricate the shoulder joints. Inhale and exhale. Bring your arms to your sides, leading with the elbow up to the ceiling to open up the side body. We'll do 4 of these on each side. Now we'll do 8 jumps in place. Keep your arms up by your chest and don't forget to smile. Bring your feet slightly wider apart, activate your arms and pulse back, opening up your chest, taking nice deep breaths. We'll do 8 of these. Bring your hands on your hips, hinge forward, keeping your knees slightly bent, opening up your hamstrings. 8 of these. Bring your arms out parallel to the ground. Now we'll do 8 squats. Bring your feet slightly wider apart. Bring your arms up by your shoulders. Pulse back 8 times. Now for standing swinging twists, opening up the spine. Turn to each side 4 times, letting the momentum of your arms carry you around. Coming back to center, we'll end with 8 pliés. Inhaling as you go down, exhaling as you come up. Much of the movement we'll be sharing in hoop technique takes place off the body, with the hoop being manipulated by your hands. Many of the moves are wrist intensive, so please begin by stretching and warming up your wrists. Rich will lead you through some wrist stretches.
To begin, let's shake out our wrists. Place your palms together with one hand facing up and one hand facing down. Now switch hands. Remember to relax your shoulders. And then repeat one more time. Next, we'll shake our hands out. And then roll our wrists outward. Shake again, and then we'll roll our hands inward. Wrist strength aids in our ability to precisely grab, stop, and release the hoop. I often find myself drilling repetitive motions out of habit. These habits build strength. The first wrist exercise I do is quite simple. Throughout this exercise, your hand should remain stationary at your side. Only the hoop should be moving, and your hand will be the center of rotation. I begin with the hoop in the wheel plane, gripping the hoop at 6 o'clock. First, I allow the hoop to drop, rotating backwards around my hand. As it completes its rotation, I stop the hoop's momentum with my grip and send it back in the opposite direction, rotating forward. As it comes back around, I re-grip again and send it backwards this time. Try and minimize wobble when you change the hoop's rotation and make these reverses as precise as possible. Practice in both directions and give attention to maintaining flat planes.
Of our four primary movement concepts, our starting point is space. This refers to the space we occupy while hooping, both with our bodies and by extension, our hoop.
Through exercises and instruction, this chapter will teach you to utilize space more effectively and bring greater awareness to the shapes created by both the hoop and your body.
Hoop dance can be an expression of how we experience the world. For the last 10 years, I've studied and practiced architecture, the art and science of designing space. This requires an acute awareness of how humans interact with their environment. Investing so much time reflecting on space has greatly impacted how I perceive the world. Constantly considering design principles such as scale, composition, harmony, and contrast. In thinking of the hoop as a tool that I can use to draw shapes, through my movement, I create lines, patterns, and three-dimensional forms. Space is often and usefully defined in terms of dimensions. Although we often think of our life in a linear fashion, with the future before us and the past behind, we also exist in every moment in a three-dimensional landscape, defined by length, width, and depth. To illustrate, if we consider a single point without size, this point has no dimensions. If we then introduce a second point and connect these 2 points with a line, we now have a one-dimensional line. It has the dimension of length. As soon as we introduce a third point, we've defined a two-dimensional plane. In relation to hoop dance, defining this two-dimensional plane is often the focus when hooping off the body or performing for an audience. In this mindset, we can consider the patterns that we create as similar to drawing on a sheet of paper. Once we consider the third dimension, which is the depth of the two-dimensional field, we begin exploring 3D space, which is the space we experience in our day-to-day lives. When moving intentionally in three-dimensional space, we can create volumes. Within the concept of space, we'll apply the related ideas of planes, isolation, scale, and 3D shapes to the creation of hoop movement.
The following moves are primarily illustrating terminology related to spinning the hoop on our hands. Let's begin with the wall plane. The wall plane is the vertical plane parallel to our torso in front of us or behind us. So there are two wall planes: the front wall plane and the back wall plane. When we spin the hoop parallel to our torso on either side of our body, we call this the wheel plane. There are also two wheel planes: the left wheel plane and the right wheel plane, just like the wheels on a car. The floor plane is parallel to the ground. When we're spinning the hoop on our waist, the hoop is in the floor plane. Also, when we spin the hoop overhead, this is called the floor plane, as it is parallel to the floor. If you perform hooping in front of an audience, planes are especially important to be aware of. Consider how the plane and angle of your hoop will appear to the viewer. Use your stage space and orientation to the audience to make your performance more dramatic and visually appealing. A plane that is parallel to the audience is often the most dramatic. Playing with planes and angles in front of a mirror is a good way to find out which orientation your audience will enjoy most.
Isolations create an optical illusion by defining a fixed point in relation to a frame of reference. The motion of the hoop around a fixed point brings awareness to that point. This creates an illusion where the hoop appears to float in space.
There are three main variants of an isolation that we can accomplish with a hoop. The first type is a center point isolation. A center point isolation is the isolation most often performed with the hoop. In a center point isolation, there's actually no portion of the hoop that remains stationary, but the visual effect and illusion is that the hoop is stationary, as though it's rotating around the stillness at the center of a wheel. In this instance, the actual isolated location is the center of rotation. The center of rotation is the point fixed in space relative to the body or audience. We can also isolate the hoop around any point on the hoop. We call this a point-on-hoop isolation. In this case, a single point on the hoop remains fixed in space. The rest of the hoop rotates about that point. This can be done in plane or out of plane. In a two-point isolation, 2 points on the hoop remain fixed in space while the hoop rotates around these 2 points. This creates an axis around which the hoop rotates. This is also called an axial isolation. The axis of rotation can be horizontal, vertical, or on angle. In axial isolations, the hoop is creating a three-dimensional shape, a sphere. The first isolation that we'll introduce is a two-hand inside isolation. This isolation allows you to maintain contact with the hoop through the entire isolation. Before beginning, it helps to close your eyes and imagine a fixed ring floating in space in front of you, equal in size to your hoop. We'll be calling this imaginary ring your base isolation ring or base ring. Also imagine a stationary point floating in the middle of that ring. This is the center of rotation. Fix these images in your mind. Your base ring is a conceptual reference for the path of your isolation. We'll start with both hands at 6 o'clock with an inside grip, palms facing down, thumbs together. Begin your rotation in the clockwise direction. As your hands approach the 9 o'clock position, you'll begin feeling tension in your leading arm, your left. Release the hoop from your leading hand and regrip in the trailing position, your palms facing your body, pinkies together, forearms parallel. Once you reach the 3 o'clock position, you'll begin to feel tension in your leading arm again, this time your right arm. Release with your leading hand, then regrip in the trailing position, palms facing your body, thumbs together. As you continue following the base isolation ring back through the 6 o'clock position, you've completed one isolated rotation.
It's important to keep in mind that your hands need to be tracing the imaginary bass ring through the entire rotation in order to cleanly isolate the hoop. The most common cause of a wonky isolation is that the person is tracing a path larger or smaller than their hoop. Try without a hoop if you're having a hard time. At any point in an isolation, the counterpoint should be directly across from your point of contact and intersecting the center of rotation. If my point of contact is at 3 o'clock, my counterpoint should be at 9. Keeping a soft focus on the top edge of your hoop can be helpful. Try completing an isolation while maintaining that awareness. You will likely realize that the hoop is not following a perfect path and that it's falling in and out of alignment with your bass ring. If your hoop, and by extension your bass ring, are larger than your arms can reach, it will be impossible for you to do a clean isolation. Hence, isolations are often more easily performed with a smaller diameter hoop. We recommend learning and practicing isolations in front of a mirror, as it can be challenging to see how precise your movement is without one. On a sunny day, your shadow is a useful substitute for a mirror. Practice slowly. Doing this will help you consciously maintain a clean isolation. And since you have both hands on the hoop, this allows additional control, enabling you to stop at any point and change direction without too much strain on your wrists. Isolations take time and practice to perfect, so be patient with yourself in the learning process.
A one-hand inside isolation is what most think of when they first imagine an isolation with a hoop. Although it's often the isolation one learns first, this variant is significantly more challenging to perform with precision. Begin by envisioning your bass ring, equal in size to your hoop. Spiral will be demonstrating this move with the hoop isolating in the clockwise direction using her right hand. This is a good place to start for most. Holding the hoop at 6 o'clock in your right hand with an inside grip, palm facing your body slightly toward the ground, begin your isolation following the path of your bass ring. As we approach 10 o'clock, you will begin feeling tension in your right wrist. At this point, you will release the hoop, rotating your hand and re-gripping at approximately 2 o'clock with an inside grip, palm facing toward the sky. During this hand transition, the point of contact rolls across the back of your right hand. While this happens, your right hand should continue along the arching path along your bass ring. This reduces wobble and keeps your hoop isolated. You may experience a momentary feeling of leap as your hand jumps from grip to grip. After re-gripping, continue creating a circle in space back around, isolating your hoop. This hand transition along the top is the most difficult part of the move and the source of most wobble. Almost everyone has some degree of discernible wobble. Practice will refine your isolation, but this is a challenging move to perform and takes time to perfect. As you first learn the one-hand inside isolation, going fast will probably help you maintain a cleaner isolation. As you become comfortable with it, practicing your isolation slowly will be a good way to hone your skill. The hand transition will become slower, requiring you to accurately trace the top of the arc in order to maintain the isolation. Also, bring your awareness to where you are releasing the hoop and where you are re-grabbing it. These points should be directly across from each other. Another useful tip is to practice the top portion of the isolation, the hand transfer, back and forth without completing your isolation. It's also useful to practice the bottom half of the isolation. After practicing these parts independently, combine the two halves. This move is usually performed several times in succession in order to establish a clean path and to reinforce the illusion of the isolation. Isolations can be done clockwise with either hand and also counterclockwise with either hand. The mechanics and tips are the same regardless of what direction or hand you choose. Mastering all the variants will increase your ability to isolate in flow.
Here are some isolation variations to ignite your imagination.
Within the concept of space, we address the idea of scale. Scale refers to the overall size of your movement, from small to large, contracted to extended.
When considering scale in relation to hoop dance, we bring an awareness to the size of our movements and their proportion to each other. Utilizing scale in the size of your movement creates a proportional composition, one that is enhanced by contrast and harmony. Both your body and hoop can affect scale. In this demonstration, Rich is primarily exploring scale using his hoop. There are infinite ways to affect scale in the space around your body. Move from center with energy and awareness. Change levels, free your feet, extend, and contract. Here are some examples applying scale to hoop dance by using the body. Up and down. Change vertical levels. Rise up from the ground and sink down low. Forward and back. Project forward and backward through space and return to center. Right and left. Extend from center out to your sides. Move with the trajectory of your hoop, following its momentum through space with an engaged body. Utilize scale by varying